All right, you all. We have a special treat for you today. I'm so excited today because we are in the month of May and we know that we are on our way to Unrobe. So, if you have been following me at any time, especially over the last 6 months, you have heard us talk about Unrobe. And Unrobe is not just any conference, but I believe that Unrobe is a platform or it is a platform that allows other individuals to come up to give information to help us to be a better person. And so, what better way to start this month out with, other than what the one of the people who are going to be one of the spokesmen for or spokesperson for our workshop. So again, I'm so excited because today I have the honor of introducing a very dynamic and compassionate voice in the field of mental health by the name of Melissa Booker, LCMHC. And as a licensed clinician or clinical mental health counselor, Melissa, I believe she brings just not only years of experience in her field, but she brings years of experience guiding individuals through the most difficult part of their lives and stuff. And so I think it's important for us to understand, when we have people in front of us, who are they and what can they bring to the table? So I'm not going to prolong everything, but I want to say this real quickly. Again, Melissa, not only does she brings years of experience in guiding individuals through moments that may be challenging, she gives them wisdom, she shows empathy and clarity, but she also is one of the speakers, workshop speakers for the conference on Saturday, May the 17th. So today I felt like, hey, let's just go ahead and bring her up so that you can kind of get a taste of what's going to take place. I'm excited. I'm going to go ahead and bring her on because if I don't, I will continue to talk. So, all right, y'all, let's go ahead. All right, Melissa.
Hey, Apostle Q.
How you doing?
I am good. I'm good. I'm good. Thank
Listen,
you for this opportunity because you're taking me out of my comfort zone, but I will do this for you.
listen, I appreciate and I feel honored. I feel honored. Before I read your bio, I just really want the people to know that, when they come to the conference, um, May the 16th, 17th, or 18th, there's three different days that we have available. So when they come, and I'm saying they come to all three, right? When they come, they're going to hear different voices. They're going to be exposed to um, different a different atmosphere because each atmosphere is going to be different because all of the speakers carry different weight. We all carry different anointing, and I think that's very important for people to see and to hear. So, who are they going to get? All right, so let me read just a little bit about you. So, Melissa Booker, she is a licensed clinical mental health counselor that has a certification in nurturing parenting and strengthening families. Her desires are to help hurting individuals. Her desires to help hurting individuals has helped her to pursue a career in mental health counseling. She received her undergraduate degree in psychology from North Carolina A&T State University, and she received her master's in in professional counseling from Liberty University. As a counselor, she feels that it is important to be able to participate. I'm adding all these words, Melissa. I'm sorry. I'm simply adding to your bio. But she she feels it's important to be able to practice active listening and the ability to reflect on those things that were shared to assist individuals who are trying to cope with life stressors. Melissa, she's a wife, she's a mother, she enjoys spending time with her family, and she's very active in her church and also with their youth that they have. Melissa, she enjoys shopping with her grandmother and her daughter, and her spare time she likes to read a good book and practice self care by shopping. Um, that's just a little bit. I was adding. I guess I need to put my glasses on too, but I was adding to your bio. And one thing I can say about you that I've learned about you is that I do know that you practice self care. I do know that you love your family. I do know that you are not just a woman who says that I have a degree. or my undergrad is in psychology, my master's is in counseling. You're not just a person who just say that's what you have done. You are living out what you have accomplished. And I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to have you as one of our speakers for the workshop on Saturday, May the 17th at 11 a.m. So I've read the bio, I did my intro of you, but tell the people, who is Melissa?
Well, Melissa is someone is very humbled. Melissa is someone that's not always comfortable with being in front on a platform such as this, but in my life, on my journey, and where I'm at, I know it's not my will, but it's God's will. And I say, I know that He has placed me in this role, in this way, in order to help us hurting people, because there's a lot of hurt going on right now.
Mhm.
And I recognize that, and I welcome any opportunity to be used by Him in that fashion.
Yeah. So, what made you go to school to be a counselor?
Well, um, I think I knew I always wanted to go to college, and I
Mhm.
think when my senior year in high school, when I took a psychology class, I
Mhm.
liked it. And I think that was the beginning stages of me. I said, psychology, I like this. And
Mhm.
I think that was the beginning step with me wanting to pursue psychology. But then just life happens, um, and just wanting to put myself in a position just to help people who are hurting, because we've all experienced hurt. And if there's any way that I can be used in that way to help people, that's something I always wanted to do.
Right, right. So, when you say hurt, and we, like you said, we know that we all have experienced hurt. How do you think the level of hurt, or how do we carry hurt now versus how we may have carried hurt back in the day?
I think a lot of people carry hurt in their experiences and the choices that they make.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people have heard this saying, but it's really true that hurt people because they're
Mhm.
coming from a place of hurt. And that's why when you were telling me about Unrobe and what you're trying to do to help people, I think sometimes having the opportunity or the platform or being able to experience that can help them unrobe some of that hurt, so that they can get to a point where they're okay and not hurt so much, so they don't feel the need to hurt other people because of their hurts.
Right, right. And so, like for, I know you know, but there may be some who still may not know about Unrobe. Unrobe is not just a provocative term. Unrobe is a platform again where you can be vulnerable, where you can just expose yourself. I have this saying, you don't have to expose me, I will expose myself. And the reason why I say that is, you know, a lot of times we move in fear, we move in a survival rate because of the things we have done in our past, or maybe some things that we may have inherited. And with that, it limits us, or it causes us to stumble, or it causes us just to freeze and not really be the true person that God has called us to be. So when we expose ourselves, what we're saying is, I don't need for you to tell me I have a spirit of rejection, or the spirit of abandonment haunts me every now and then. I don't need for anybody to tell me why my attitude is the way that it is. I know I have attitude. I know that I deal with rejection. I know that I deal with abandonment. I know that I deal with self-sabotage. I don't need for you to tell me. But the thing about it is, if I can say I know, then that's the first step, right, of getting healed, or walking in that area of healing. I have to first admit that there's something that's wrong. And then if I don't know how to work it out within me, then I need to go to somebody else who can help. A lot of times, and I share this with you, we always think that the pastor has the answer for everything. And as leaders, we don't have all the answers, to everybody's problems. We don't, unless we are educated in those arenas, and we continue to be educated. We don't have all the answers. We can direct you to the Bible. We can pray for you. We can also, of course, remind you of God, the Holy Spirit. We can do all of that. But I'm going to say it is a safe place. It is a safe, you can feel safe, or you should be, or you should feel safe to also not only go to your pastor or your leader, but find somebody else who you can trust in, who may be qualified in those areas to help you, and not just say get over it. Because I'm gonna be honest, Melissa, I don't like telling people, well, just pray about it. Your stomach ache is going to go away. No, I don't want to just pray about my stomach ache going away. I need to know, why do I continue to get the stomach ache every month? And even some of the meds I may have been taking, they're not working. I need to talk to somebody that's going to help me to figure out what's going on and how to prevent it in the future. That's why I expose myself. You don't have to. And I say, if you start working on you, what it does is it makes the enemy powerless. It doesn't give him any power over you, you know?
Mhm.
So, how would you encourage a person? Again, I'm not knocking people from going to their pastors. I'm a pastor, I'm a leader. We do want people to come to us, but there are times where we have to be honest and say, baby, I cannot help you in this area. Um, I can't. However, I think we can refer you to one of our therapists that's, part of our ministry, or a therapist that we know that, has a good track record with helping people. What do you think about that?
I think that's good because I said, mental health is important. Mental health is
Uh-huh.
just as important as your physical health. And one thing I always say that everybody's idea of okay is different, and it's okay. And I think a lot of time it's just becoming that concept of being okay, and how it might not meet the expectation of what somebody else's idea of what that looks like for you, and just being able to just work on what it looks like for you. And
Explain
sometimes
that.
that's, huh,
I'm,
excuse
I'm
me.
sorry. Dive a little bit deeper. What works for you may not work for me. Explain that.
Because everybody's different. Everybody's life experience is different. Everybody who Your experiences is what makes you the person you are today. And
Uh-huh.
a lot of times people's experience have not been good experience. They've been traumatic experience. There have been abusive experience. And that's all you know. And it's just being able to have an understanding of that experience and how it
Right.
made you feel, and help you understand. Because I tell people all the time, when you're a child and everything that you had to go through it as a child, you had no control over that. You were the
Right.
child. You just had to go along with whatever life brought you, but just
Right.
kept helping you understand that when you become of an adult, you know what? You are in control. You
Right.
can create the narrative. You don't necessarily have to be who that experience has taught you to be. It's okay to
Right.
want something different, to want something more, to walk in that healing, whatever that looks like for you. And it's okay. And sometimes in counseling, it's about just starting at the bare basic of what it is
Right.
that's going to look like for them. You know, what it is that they want for themselves. Because a lot of times nobody hears anything positive that, yeah, you can go out there and do. No, sometimes people hold on to the negative, like, oh, you're no good because your family was no good.
Right.
You're going to be like it because that's who your mother, your father was. And that's not necessarily the case. You
Right.
can be who it is you decide you want to be, in terms of, you know, I'd like, for me, I said, you know what, I want to go off to college and I want to major in psychology. That
Uh-huh.
was something I want to be. Not necessarily did my mom go off to college and my dad go off to college and do that. No, but that was what my choice for myself that I wanted to be. I wanted to be able to set my choice of what my life wanted to be, create the narrative of how I wanted it to be. And sometimes when people don't have anybody in their life to say, hey, you know what, that's something you want to do, go do it. Help them get out of their own way so that they can live their life in a way that is okay for them and not somebody else's idea of what it looks like for them.
Right. Right. So let's go back to our childhood.
Okay.
Would you agree that a lot of our issues stem from our childhood?
I would agree. It does.
So by the time we become an adult, it's hard to navigate life because all you know is what has been presented to you as a child. And as a child, we are taking things in as sponges, right? So
Yes.
now that I'm an adult, how do I go back to my childhood, unravel the hurt, the pain, the all the issues that I may really be harboring in my heart? How do I go back to my childhood and fix that? I know I physically can't go back, but how do I talk to that little girl? Do me a favor, talk to the little girl, talk to the little Melissa. What would you tell Melissa?
That a lot of times people need to understand that some things that happen to them is not their fault. That, sometimes when we had parents that didn't make always make the best decisions, or had family members that always make you feel the way you felt like you needed to be felt, to feel accepted and to feel loved, that wasn't your fault. To help you get to an understanding that you cannot let other people's issues and their feelings affect who you are. It's almost like you have to start at the bare minimum to not take that on and think that you contribute to that in any kind of way, because you didn't, because you were a child. Children didn't ask to be treated and done a certain kind of way. They just had to go along with what that situation presented themselves to, and just help them understand it was not your fault.
Right, right. But how do we like deal with mental health issues right now? We know that, it's the issues of life, you know, they're just, there's an uprise, things have changed, the whole world has changed. I'm not going to say over the last decade, I would say over the last year, things have changed. So how do we, again, we're talking to that woman or we're talking to that man, but really we're talking to the child that's on the inside of them.
Yes, we are.
How do we get them to understand, like you said, it's not your fault. But as a 49-year-old woman, how can talk to me? Talk to little Q. All right. So to, talk to the part of me that says that I know that I wasn't at fault. I had nothing to do with my parents getting together. I had nothing to do with my upbringing. I had nothing to do with the zip code or the location that I was raised in. But how do I make sure that I balance a healthy life as a 49-year-old woman?
I think it starts like that, is having an understanding, because we can sit there and say it's not your fault, but you're going to have to sit there and process out those hurts, because those hurts just does not go away.
So we have
And
to talk about them.
you have to talk about them. You
Right.
really do, because it's almost, I use this analogy a lot in therapy. um it's like, we keep putting stuff in the closet, and we just
Hmm.
keep saying, I'm gonna put it in my closet and I'll just deal with it another day. And eventually you're gonna have to clean out that closet. And a lot of times
Right.
when people come to therapy, that's them cleaning out that closet,
Right.
you know,
Right.
putting their life in order in a way that's comfortable for them, making
Right.
that decision that, what, I am tired of letting those feelings, those childhood issues keep me down and keep me from living my best life. I'm ready to live. I'm ready to be happy. I'm ready just to be to a place in my life where I'm okay. And sometimes we
Right.
have to clean out that closet in order to get to that place where we're okay.
Right. But as we age and become an adult, we tend to sweep things up under the rug. We know we need to talk, but we just don't talk, right? So
Mhm.
we tend to we find ourselves um, covering up the hurt by doing certain things, engaging in certain activities. We there's a lot of talk about avoidance.
Mhm.
We run from run from the problem. We want relationships with people, but we don't know how to maintain the relationship. How
Mhm.
do we get people? And right now, I want to talk about um, um, the adults right now. How do we get adults to understand that it is important to not only communicate or to talk, but to understand? Okay, yes, we're going to visit back to that childhood, but to understand that working overtime is not always the answer.
Mhm.
Excessive drinking, is not going to solve the problem that you're hurting. You know, being out here, being with a whole lot of people, it's really not going to soothe that burning or that heart problem that you have. How do we get people to truly come to the reality that I've been substituting one thing for something else and I'm still not satisfied?
And one thing that I do, because I deal with that a lot, and to sit back, because I think a lot of times people do those things to try to cope because they don't want to deal with what it is that's really going on. And so it's
Right,
about sitting down and saying, okay, you don't tried this and you've done that and you're still not okay. So let's talk
right,
about what okay is going to look like
right,
for you.
right,
What is that going to look
right,
like?
right, right,
And that's when we get to really sit down and start working on it, because when you can sit back and really say, you know what I've been doing doesn't make me okay. It's not
right,
helping, and
right,
and now we can work with something, because it's okay. Well, let's figure out, let's sit here and we're going to talk about what is it going to look like for you to
right,
be okay. Like when
right,
we can
right,
really sit down and divulge and process that out to figure out what
right,
okay looks like for you. Because what people have to recognize and understand is it looks different for everybody. And I think a
mhm,
lot of times it's the expectation. And I tell
mhm,
people all the time, you can't live your life and be happy somebody else's idea what that looks like for you.
right,
You can't put that level of control onto another human being, because you know how some people do stuff because it's important to that person. But if you don't do it just right and you feel that level of disappointment from that person that you didn't do it exactly right the way they want to, that level of betrayal, and that you feel like, oh my goodness, I was doing my best but it still wasn't good enough, it's adding to the hurt. And that's why I'm
right,
saying, I tell people, I say, you got to be okay your idea what it looks like for you. That's why we do
right,
have to deal with the childhood. We do have to deal with the hurts and pains that you experience, and then be able to sit back and evaluate what okay looks like for you. What is
right,
it that you feel like happiness is going to look like for you? Not somebody else's idea or what you perceive other people's
right,
idea of happiness, but your own, because it looks different for everybody. And it's okay.
right,
It's not supposed to be the same.
right, right, right. I think when I think back to my childhood, um, to be honest, my grandma, and my aunts and all them, my mom, they did the best that they could. They really tried their best to make sure that we had a roof over our head. There was no question. We had a roof. We had a roof over our head. We had food. We had clothes on our backs, and we think about that. We think, okay, we got the basic needs taken care of, right? But
Mhm.
then now that I am grown, now that I've experienced life, now that I have a lot of information, I have to be honest and say that they didn't know how to take care of the emotional part of Latanya. Counseling, therapy, all this stuff, I'm sure it wasn't talked about, back then. So they didn't know. I'm sure they knew, if I was crying, I was sad, or I may have gotten hurt or whatever. But I don't think they understood the deep wounds that I experienced, with the absence of having a father in my life, the rejection that I felt as being the outside child. Not that I had anything to do with it. We know that,
Of course.
but being honest, my grandma, when I say she did, listen, when I say she did the best, her, my mom, my aunts, they did the best that they could, but it was still that void. And I'm unrobing because, hey, this is where healing comes in. And
Mhm.
let me say this, sometimes in unrobing, it may make other people feel uncomfortable, but
Mhm.
I feel like you have to do what's necessary to get your freedom, your
Mhm.
breakthrough. So it's not about, making somebody look bad, or, damaging a person's character or whatever. It's really about you and what's going to work for you as far as your healing and deliverance.
Right.
So I want to throw that in. All right, so back to me. So as I was saying, for me, I feel like as a child growing up, I did not know. I, I didn't know that I was so badly damaged until I got into my 20s. And I'm gonna be honest. I knew to make sure that me and my children had a roof over our head. I knew to make sure that they had good, clean clothes. They looked nice. I knew to make sure I looked nice. I knew to, I made sure I had always had nice cars and stuff like that. But to be honest, Melissa, all of that was covering up the fact that I felt very, very small. I really did. I felt like, why am I really existing? Who really loves me? Who really want to be around me? When I got pregnant with the Austin, I was a teenage mom, and my story is I got pregnant on purpose, and I did. I wasn't trying to trap my kid's father. I wanted someone to love me, and I felt like, hey, let me have this baby. He gonna love me. I'm gonna make him love me. And I did that because for so many years I didn't feel that type of love. That goes back to, did my grandma and them do the best they could? Yes. Did my mom? Yes. Did my aunts? Did my sister? Everybody did the best that they could. However, I was still missing this type of love that I wanted. And I felt like at an early age, the age of 14, at the age of 14, I felt like I need more. I need more as far as love. And so I got pregnant, and when I had the Austin, I remember when they told me that I was pregnant. It was during basketball season, and those who know me, y'all know I'm about that ball, right? But I was cool with not playing ball. I was okay with it. I played up until my stomach got real big, and then my coach said, "You can't play anymore." But it didn't matter because I knew at the end, at the term, I'm going to have somebody that loves me.
Mhm.
14, turning 15, I'm going to have somebody that loves me. I wasn't thinking about the Austin's going to need some diapers. Who's going to keep the Austin while I go to school to further my education to go off to college to play basketball? I didn't care about that. I had this huge hole in my heart that I felt like this child is going to be the plug.
Mhm.
How do you talk to when we see these young girls getting pregnant? I know that things are different now, right? I know
Mhm.
that some people are welcoming, the teenage pregnancy. I know it's different, but how do you talk to that young teenage girl who's saying, "I want a baby because I want something"?
Mhm.
Just like I'm telling you my story. How do you help that young girl who comes to your office and say, "I think I want to get pregnant"?
Okay. And it all
I know I
goes
said
back.
a lot.
I know that you fine, but it all goes back to your life experiences at that point, and the introduction to love, and what you perceive love to be. And a lot of times you felt like you were trying to take care of a void that was in your life by having
Right.
a child, because you felt a lack in not having that love from your father. And just and when you say it like that, you get it, because people, like, when you think about when you're dealing with young people, you
Hmm.
know our brains are still trying to develop, and a lot of times, you know it's based on experiences that gives us an idea of what we feel like is the best solution for us at that time. So
Right.
I get it. I understand. That's what your perceived solution for this void that I'm feeling it. This lack of love that I'm feeling in this way. This is what I'm choosing. This is going to be my go-to in order to help you fill that void. But then a lot of times you find out, does it really fill the void?
Hmm. Right. Right. Right.
And just being able to process that, because you're still going to have to deal with that, where that lack is coming from, where that void is coming from, you know,
Right.
and it comes, and that's why therapy is important, because we can talk about the whys, not always necessarily the perceived solutions, or why you
Right.
feel like that's such a void, and you feel like this is your solution for filling that void.
Hmm.
Do you think
Right.
it
Right.
really is? Even at that moment, you might think, yeah, yeah. But if you think about in the long run, because a lot of times when you do that, you say, okay, this is me fulfilling that void, or what I feel like I'm lacking in. And then when you're still dealing with it, does it really fill
Right.
that void or what you lack in?
Right.
But until you get down to that,
Right. Right.
understanding
Right.
that it's not going to be
Right.
fulfilled in that way.
Right. Right. And to the age I'm at now, and then looking back, no, it didn't. It didn't fill the void. It didn't do the plug-in like I thought that it would. What
Mhm,
it did was it brought on more responsibilities.
mhm,
It brought in a child into this world who I catered to the, well, not just cater, but I loved him. I loved him to the point, well, no, I'm going to be honest. I loved him enough because I didn't really know what love was. I loved him through my lens. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until I became older to where I could love beyond his faults, beyond the teenage trials, you know what I'm saying? The things that, that you experience when you have children. I was able to love him beyond those things. And to this day, my son, he's in his 30s, and I would go to bat for him, because of the love that I have for him. But to think back then at 14, 15, did I have this kind of love? I can say no, I didn't, because I really didn't know what love was. I said it was love. I want love. Let me have a baby that's going to love me. But that really wasn't what I was searching for, if I can say that. It wasn't it really wasn't the right thing that I needed at the time. Not so I didn't need him, but I'm talking about the emotion that I'm trying to
Right.
fix. Because still today, there are still times I have to deal with those areas of voidness. You know what I'm saying? Those areas where I feel void, that love, where I'm still upset about how I was rejected as a child. And I'm 40 something, and my child, and I'm using him as an example. He's 30 something years old that went on with his life, you know what I'm saying? And I'm still stuck with feeling the same feelings that I felt as a kid. And I
Mhm.
think that this is important for us to understand because we do things, but why are we doing these things? Like I was saying earlier about sometimes we go into certain realms, or we start doing things that we have no business doing, thinking that it's going to fill the void when it really just make a big mess out of our lives. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I would say was now that I'm talking, or at least talking it out, when I got pregnant with my son, I got pregnant out of what I felt was a need, a want. But when we got pregnant with Octavia, it was a desire.
Mhm.
And I think that's a difference when you look at what love is,
It
you
it
know?
is.
Yeah, yeah. So how do
Mhm.
we, again, how do we encourage people to identify those issues and say, hey, yeah, this is what you're feeling, but we may need to identify as this and not that to help solve your problem or to help you to become better.
It went out a little bit. Sorry to
Okay.
say, repeat that. I'm sorry. It went out
How,
a little.
oh, okay, well, basically, how do we get people to understand that even though, like, use me as an example, as a teenage mom, even though I thought that I wanted someone to love me, because I
Mhm.
said, I'm going to make this baby love me,
Mhm.
that was really foolish. How are you going to make a baby love you, right? The responsibility fell on me to love him and show
Mhm.
him what love is.
Right.
But that's why I say I can only love him, but so much because I only knew just a little bit. So,
Mhm.
how do we get people to understand that what you're looking for may not be really what you're searching for? It may not really be what you need. You
Right.
think you want love because of this, but let's really go and say, no, this is really what you need to work on.
Mhm. But like I said, you were 14 and you was
Uh-huh.
trying to figure it out based on where you were in your life at that time. And then when you got older, based on your experiences at that age, it looked different to you.
Hmm.
So it's all about that. And then I also use this too. Life is full of lessons. And so a lot of
Uh-huh.
times you have to look at it as a life lesson. And one thing
Hmm.
about life lessons is it's about learning from those lessons. And based on
Hmm.
what you learn, do better
Right,
because nobody's perfect. No, nobody always has the greatest answer. But you know what? At the end of the day, people do the best they can, and it's about
right,
helping people understand that okay, that might not have been the best choice at that point in your life, but you can't go back and
right,
change anything that's already
right,
happened. The only thing I encourage people to do, let's learn from those things based on what you learned and how can you do better. And I,
right, right,
when you look at it from that standpoint and that you can learn from, you can help yourself not have continual
right,
repeats. Because if you
right.
think about this is out there, what happens when you continue to do the same thing with no results? You know,
Right.
they look at that as like a definition of insanity, but I look at it
Right.
like a definition of not sitting back, evaluating your choices, and seeing a lesson in it and
Right.
choosing to do better.
Right. Right. Right.
So, so
Right.
I think, like, I think it's just important to just give yourself some grace from where you were at that point in your life. Learn from
Mm-hmm.
these things because based on all our life experiences, it's helping us form us to the person we are today.
Right.
And
Right.
you have to
Right.
look at, if you can look at it as a lesson, you can look at it like, because I went through that and I experienced
Mm-hmm.
that, it helps me with how I look and I'm having to navigate this based on the lesson I learned from that. And then
Right.
two, I think this is something um, that really God's been working with me with, that I know He's going to use me in that way. People's definition of love, because I heard you say that a lot. Because think about it, when you think of your first introduction to love is the parent love, the mom,
Mm-hmm.
the love you have
Right.
with your parents, your mom and your dad. And when that's tainted, not the way it meant to be, it kind of distorts how it's supposed to be. And a lot of
Right.
time in life, we're trying to recover from that because of how
Right.
it's presented to us is not the way God meant for it to be. But you know, the
Right.
only thing about it is we have to work towards having an understanding of that's not what God meant it to be for us, and be able
Right.
to get to the point where we can move to seeing love the way God meant for us to love. And our
Right. Right.
parents, sometimes we weren't brought up with parents that was able to role model and demonstrate that to us. And that's why it's so important in our growth and our spiritual growth with God for us to come to that conclusion and that learning of love through His eyes, and not necessarily from our parents' eyes when it wasn't a healthy love.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
they weren't able to
I didn't.
demonstrate that to us in that way.
Right. And I didn't know I was going to start out talking about being a teenage mom. But one thing I can say is this is why we have to be careful on how we deal with people. Because again, in my teenage years, after I found out I was pregnant, of course, there were some disappointments because back then, again, no, you don't get pregnant at that age, or at least we don't suggest that, right?
Right.
But no one knew what I was battling on the inside.
Mhm.
See, sometimes people can mistake it. Oh, you just out there being fast. You know what I'm saying? You just out there you ain't got no business out there having sex. Now look at you, done got pregnant. I'll be
Mhm.
honest. No, that's no, no. And when I tell people, I wanted to get pregnant, but again, I wasn't trying to trap their father. You understand? This was personal. This
Mhm.
was about Platania. This is about a young girl at that age who thought she understood what love was, and also she wanted it. She seen
Mhm.
it with her friends. She saw her friends' parents, show up at the games. She saw her
Mhm.
friends' parents show up for the conference. I mean, for the concerts and the conferences.
Mhm.
She saw her friends' parents, take them on vacations. And this is what I thought love was.
Mhm.
This is what I thought love was. Okay, okay, all this is going on. I don't get that. I'm not
Mhm.
getting any of this, but I want that. I feel like again, if I make somebody, because you can't make a grown person do right, right? At
Mhm.
14, I felt like I couldn't make anybody, but I was like, but if I could make a little human, that
Mhm.
little human, you know what I'm saying? I can love him and just cuddle with him and make him love me, raise him to say, you're gonna love me. And what? In return, he gonna love me, you
Mhm.
know. But again, I was only giving him what I knew. That's why
That's
I'm being honest. I often tell my kids, I apologize for a lot of stuff. I think I was a good parent. They say, Mom, you was good. Other people may say that I was good. But to be honest, the outside was good, but the inside really wasn't. I'm just gonna be
Mhm.
straight up. And but now that I know God, I know the Holy Spirit, and I'm very transparent. And again, we have Unrobe. I can say to myself, even though I was a good parent, I did the best that I knew to do. Now I'm also saying, okay, Tanya, those things that that was a hindrance in your past, don't allow them to influence your future.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
why, I have a therapist, I make sure that I see my therapist, about 5 times a week. And it's it's okay because I'm not ashamed to
It
say
is okay.
that
It's okay.
yeah. But what
Yeah.
was you gonna say? Because I think I kept on talking.
No,
It's okay.
no, no, no. That's fine. I mean, but I think it's important to be able to nobody's perfect and we have to learn to give ourselves grace and everybody does the best they can. And I
Right.
think it's
Right.
important for us to be able to tell our children, I'm not always going to do it right. And,
Right.
I might not
Right.
have meant to come at you that way, but it's about,
Right.
you don't want everybody. That's why it goes back to expectation,
Mhm.
um, sometimes you can't live your life up to anybody else's expectation and
Right.
and be happy and okay because that's giving that person too much control because
Right.
nobody's perfect. That's why I always
Right.
go back. Let's look at the lesson in it. Based on the lesson we see in it, always strive to do better because we can't
Right.
go
Right.
back and change anything that's already happened. The only thing
Right.
we can do is learn from those things and do better. And
Right.
the one thing that you gave your children that you didn't necessarily always receive, you was there and you showed up.
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes it's about just being there and just showing up, you know,
Right.
how sometimes we have to look at it in terms of I didn't necessarily get this when I was growing up. So I want to make sure when I have
Right.
kids, I'm going to give them what I didn't have. And that's
Right.
what you can do. I mean, you have to focus in on like in life, you have to focus in on the things that you can control and what you do versus the things
Right.
you can't. Because
Right.
sometimes
Right.
we put so much focus on the things we can't do and what we're not doing, it puts us in a headspace we don't need to be.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
sometimes I say, focus in on what you're doing, which
Right. Right.
what you're doing is right. You know,
Right. That's right.
the things you can control versus those things you
Right.
can't.
Right. Right.
You
And I
know,
think, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
And I think looking back, like I was saying, for people, like when we charge at people and be like, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, or we may not understand why they are doing the things they're doing now. I think we need to just slow down and just help, just really go back and say, okay, where did this come from? Why do
Mhm.
you feel this way? Why did you feel like this
Yes.
was going to fix you? See, I thought that my child, my baby was going to fix me.
Mhm.
Like I said, I didn't think about the responsibilities that came with it. I didn't. I just wanted to be fixed. And I think when we see these people who strung out on drugs, we can say, oh, won't they just stop doing drugs? They know it's killing them. They want something. We don't know what they want. When a
Mhm.
person's out here going from one partner to the next partner to the next partner, blah, 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 they want something. And instead of just pushing them away, we need to figure out or help them to figure out, baby, what do you really want?
Exactly.
Because if we have this kind of conversation, and like I said, a lot of times talking like this, it brings up things, well, it wasn't really like that, or I didn't mean to make you. It doesn't matter about what you didn't mean or what you didn't intend to do. This is the reality. Guess what? This is my reality. And
Yeah.
because this is my reality, this is my truth, this is what has happened in my life. But
Mhm.
now, and I thank God that I have the guidance of the Holy Ghost. I have the guidance of, again, my therapist, who I see about now 6 times a week, because you have to say, hey, you a hot mess. You ain't got to expose me. I expose myself. You know what? Y'all, Melissa's my therapist. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I know she probably like, phew, for you to have all this going on, girl. But you know what? We've been taught to carry the weight of the world on us. We've
Yeah.
been taught to be dirty, but yet still dress up clean.
Mhm.
And I got to the point when I started Unrobe in 2009, I came to that conclusion that I don't want to be dirty on the inside, and I sure don't want to be dirty on the outside. I had to make up in my mind that yes, I got to figure out why I do the things that I do. And not only me, but why do the people around me, why do they do the things that they do? You
Mhm.
know? Because when we understand that, then we can start having better relationships. We don't always have to isolate ourselves or just stop going to the cookouts. I want to get invited to the cookout this summer. I want people to be cool with me at the cookout, but I don't want anybody to feel like, well, I can't say that because if I bring up such and such, it's gonna make her pull back, and then we won't see her for another 2 years. I don't want that. I
Mhm.
want you to be able to bring up something, and I'm able to, hold my weight because why? I'm free. I'm delivered, and
Mhm.
this is what Unrobe is about. is confronting those things, whether they're small, medium, or big, facing those things that can prevent you from being sociable or prevent you from what thriving in life. Now, I want to talk real quickly, and I'm not going to hold you up, but I want to talk about the counseling side and then the church. You
Okay.
know, I mentioned earlier about as a pastor, we don't have all the answers. Well, let me talk about Platonic. I'm not God, all right? I don't choose to pretend to be God in people's lives. Um, I don't know everything. I teach and preach that no one is perfect. I'm not perfect, all that stuff. How do we get people to understand that in church you have the spiritual component, and then you also have that practical or those emotional things that we deal with? Because I can, as an apostle, lay hands and through the power of the Holy Ghost, lay hands on somebody and say that person go through deliverance, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see the manifestation of deliverance.
Mm-hmm.
However, when they go home, they may continue with their cycles
Mm-hmm.
of poor choices, bad behaviors. They
Mm-hmm.
come back to church again. They're not dedicated. They're not faithful. Blah blah blah. They say, "Pastor, I need prayer." You know, they come up for prayer. Next thing you know, they start crying, or say they go through some form of deliverance, and they do okay for a couple of weeks or a couple of Sundays, whatever. Then they come back, and you still see the same, issues. Some people would think, well, that person didn't really get delivered if they're continuing in those manifestations. I don't think that that's the case. I think that there's some other issues that the church is trying to get to, but I think the church is also scared to tap in, and that's truly diving in mental health. Can you please explain the difference and why it's important that any set woman, any set man should welcome counseling on that level to their congregation?
Okay. How I would address that is think about this because I think sometimes people make a discrepancy between physical and mental health because they go hand in hand. You
Okay.
can go in and say, you know what, I'm delivered from diabetes. I feel like God, but still, you need to make sure you're maintaining that diet.
Right.
You still need to make sure you're following the treatment plan because you can be delivered from something, but if you still engage in behaviors that got you in that situation in the first place, what's going to happen? There's have
Right.
to be the treatment aspect of it. I think when
Right.
you go and you get delivered from something, that is wonderful, but there still needs to be a treatment component with it too. They say I'm
Mhm.
delivered from it, but even though I'm delivered from it, I need to back it up with the treatment to say what
Right.
my life looks like now because I decided that this is not who I'm going to be anymore. I'm gonna work
Right.
towards not using any substance abuse or going out there engaging in any behaviors that doesn't make me feel good. So sometimes it's good to have that treatment plan component where you can sit down with somebody and say, okay, what is it going to look like for me now? And that's what it
Right.
is. Like in therapy, it's about you coming in with a treatment goal or how things are not haven't been going well, that you're just not okay, and just have somebody that's going to sit there and say, okay, so let's sit back and we work through and figure out what it is that okay is going to look like for you. Let's put some accountability in place that say, hey, these are some things that we can work towards to help you get to that place of being okay, because we have to remember it's those experiences that have us in that place, and sometimes the environment that we're in that
Right.
has us in that place, and sometimes having somebody come in and say, help you recognize and help you see some changes you can make to put you in that place of staying okay and walking in your deliverance. That's all it is.
Right. 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 And I like that last part, walking in your deliverance. So they
Exactly.
go hand in hand.
It
So
goes hand.
nobody should go
Mhm.
ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was agreeing with you. It goes hand in hand.
Right. Right.
It's a stigma when
So
it comes to mental health. It's such a stigma.
mhm,
Like, I'm not crazy. You know, It's not
Mhm.
about you being crazy. It's about you getting
Right,
to a place where you say, I'm tired of feeling bad. I want to be
right,
okay. And this is somebody
right,
that's going to help me get to my place where I'm okay, that
right,
I can walk in the newness of what God wants me to be. I can walk in my deliverance.
right, right. Why do we say that? I mean, why do we think on the terms, if I go to a therapist, they gonna think that I'm crazy. But you're going to them. I mean, when you go to a doctor because your stomach hurt, you want them to know that your stomach is hurting so they can help you.
Right.
So why do we? And let me ask you: do you think it's? I want to talk to the African American culture. I mean, to
Okay.
us. I want to talk to us. Do you think we, as Black people, find it hard to go to therapy, even in this day, 2025?
Yes, I do, but I think it's getting better. But I do because of the stigma that's associated with mental health. Um, like it's just a stigma. It's almost like you and I have to deal with this in therapy. It's you wouldn't think twice about going, like you said, going to the doctor. He said, like, you know what, my stomach hurting, I keep having these
Right,
stomach pain, I can't keep nothing down. You don't think nothing of it, but if you keep
right,
saying, man, I can't sleep, I keep having these nightmares, or I can't get up out of bed, you know
right, right,
those are
right,
some things or signs that your body's telling you you need something to kind of help
right,
you get through this. And it's about looking at it. It's about being okay. And to be okay, you have to be okay physically, mentally, and spiritually. They all work hand in hand. And it's about you actively involved in yourself to get to that point where you said, I want to be okay and I'm tired of feeling like this. And this is what it's going to take for me to get to a place where I'm okay,
right, right.
regardless of what other
So,
people say.
right, right. So when a person comes to you, they have to be open, right?
They have
They
to.
have to be they have to be willing to, just like how I was open and went back to when I was 14 and
Mhm.
talked about the reason why I got pregnant, at an early age. They have to be open. But not only they have to be open when they get there, but what do you think that they need to be feeling or experiencing when they leave from you?
I think they need to feel that, I'm not a bad person, that I'm
Hmm.
not who people tried to make me out to be, you know,
Right,
that that I can create my own narrative and make my life different. I don't have to be like this because my mom or my dad was like this or my family's
right,
like this. I can choose and have something different from me.
right, right. So let me ask you a question. Let's talk about the Black men because I know you see um, children, women, and men. We know that, like I said, there's a stigma that's out there. But why do you think it's really hard for our Black men to come and talk?
Because of the stigma, because they're not supposed to, uh that's not being a man. If I go and I sit down and I talk about my feelings, it's not being a man. If I shed some tears, that's not being a man. People's definition of what a man's supposed to be, oh, a man doesn't cry or a man doesn't talk about his feelings. That's not what a man, but I think it's that perception of what a man is supposed to be, and I think it keeps people from getting the help they need because of this perception.
Right, right. So who do we have to blame for that?
I
If
think
Go ahead.
no, but I think it comes from a culture. I think it
Hmm.
comes from the culture, different cultures, family cultures. When they say, "Oh, man up," or you have
Hmm.
to be a certain kind of way. Like if you want to do that, you must be crazy. Or think about some
Hmm.
people who might be the first person in their family to go off to college, and some people are saying, "Oh, you think you better than us because you went and did
Yes,
that." I mean, it's just
yes,
about the culture of who that family may be that can kind of be a determining factor why people feel and move the way they do. It's at every,
right,
and I always tell people too, you can't look at it and say all Black cultures are like, all white
right.
cultures are like, all Latino culture. Everybody, there's cultures within the cultures.
They're within the
And you
culture.
can't,
Right,
and you have to just meet people where they are at, and
right,
that's what they say. I'm not going to come in here and I'm not going to make a perception of you based on the culture aspect. I'm gonna get to know you. you know.
Right, right.
And I think just being able to just have an understanding of that,
Right,
too, when people decide to pursue this level of help for themselves will be helpful
right,
as
right.
well.
I think with the men, and right now I'm specifically talking about the black men. Um, I think that we have to create a safe space for them even before they become a man. I believe as children, I remember raising my kids, and I told both of them, "You better not cry." I
Hmm.
did. I told even Octavia, I told her you would think, and she was the girly girl, the lip gloss, the dressed like a little girl, and the Barbie dolls and all that stuff. But I told her, you better not cry. You better suck it up.
Hmm.
And I did that. Not that now get this though. My grandma knew my grandma was strong. My Aunt Sherry strong. And that's all I saw was strength. But they not one time ever say, Time, you better not cry.
Hmm.
Suck it up. They didn't say that. They didn't
Hmm.
say that. When I was out in the streets, well, not streets, because I wasn't like that, but when I was out like in school playing basketball, I had to be tough. You know what I'm saying? When I wanted to, when I felt a certain way, I cried or I felt a certain way because of what was taking place on the
Hmm.
outside. And that for me toughened me up. Not that my grandma toughened me, not that my aunt toughened me or whatever, because like I said, they never said, you better not cry. But for me, going through life the way that I had to, go through life, growing up the way that I had to grow up, because I grew up real fast, right? Going
Hmm.
through all of that, I felt like toughness was being hard, and you better not shed a tear because that
Hmm.
shows vulnerability. And if it shows vulnerability, then it shows weakness. And when you appear to be weak, then other people take advantage of you, which would then
Hmm.
make you feel less than. And I had all that in my mind even when I was raising my children. But I would say, again, my grandma never said it. It
Hmm.
was once I walked out of the door and I
Hmm.
experienced life amongst my peers that I had to put on this new identity, that I thought really, and I'm going to keep using the word, survive. I had to survive. So
Hmm.
now I have a almost 30-year-old daughter and 30 something year old son. And now I'm looking at them like, where your emotions at? What the
Hmm.
tears that we watching the movie? How come you ain't crying, Tay? Everybody cried in the movies but you. I'm just making a joke,
I know.
but it does go back to us and how we rear our children. Being in education, dealing with kids, I definitely see that for far as the young girls and the boys, there's a toughness that's being presented,
Hmm.
that's been verbalized, not understood, but just verbalized. You better not cry. You better
Hmm.
defend yourself.
Right.
So, how do we, as parents, or for those who have younger kids, what would you suggest to the younger parents when it comes down to, say, holidays, Christmas time, or birthdays, and that little boy wants that oven, he wants a certain, you know, toy that may appear to be gender coded. And I understand where we at as a society, but how do you encourage that parent when it comes to that boy to say, just because he wants this oven as a toy, that doesn't mean that he can't cry? Am I making sense?
You are, but it
Okay.
goes back to you're gonna have to. I guess my approach is very person centered, and I think, and I want to encourage parents to just be, child centered, because you know that child, and just because your child may like that, you don't make the perception that, oh, this is what he's leading to. No, sit down and talk to your child and see why that's important to him. You want your
Right.
child to grow up and be an individual and not a follower, but sit down and have the conversation. Because, and I think it's good to encourage parents to have conversation, because we have the social media aspect with raising our kids now, and they're getting different impressions of stuff. So sit down and have the conversation instead of making the assumption. Just
Right.
talk to your children.
Right. And this is not even about identity. This is
No, it's not.
about
It's
being able
about
to.
what they like.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about what they like. and getting
Mhm.
them at an early age to communicate.
Yeah.
That's why I brought that up, to get them to communicate. Because if you don't allow that young boy to communicate when he's young, then when he gets older and start dating
Mhm.
and wants to marry,
Yeah.
then it's going to be a conversation. He don't
Mhm.
talk. I came home. I had a hard day at work. I wanted him to listen, and all he
Mhm.
said, well, what you want me to do about it?
Mhm.
He's not understanding. So I need for people to understand that Unrolled is going to help us to identify us
Mhm.
and what we have adopted within our personal experience and how we have given it out to others. And is it causing poor relationships? You know what I'm saying? Is it causing damage in relationships? How can we, again, how can we better ourselves? How can we deal with those things that's on the inside of us? What are the fears that we are dealing with? All right, one more thing and we're going to close out.
Okay.
Why would you encourage someone to come to
Why would I encourage somebody to come to Unroad?
Unroad?
I think the way, the excitement that you have, I think is freeing. You know,
Hmm.
it's in an atmosphere where they can be real, and
Right,
that they can let go of the perceptions and just be who they are, and be in an
right,
environment where they're going to be accepted and understood and
right,
supported.
right, right, right. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, and thank you for this opportunity to share in this with you. I really appreciate you.
Listen, I do. I appreciate you, and I thank God for you. I thank God for your ministry, for your wisdom, for just you. You definitely have a listening ear, and I thank God for that. You know, as one who sees her therapist 7 times a week, you make it easy to talk. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
and I would say this as we close out: the setting or the platform during the conference is not a setting for people just to tell other people's business. It's not about you telling somebody else's business. It's
Mhm.
about that person telling their own story
Mhm.
within themselves at that seat in their space between them and God. Because a
Mhm.
lot of times when we're in church, we don't have time to really cry. We don't
That's
have time to really give it to God
right.
because we so dun, 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 we got to do it this way, and we don't have time after the last song is sung. We don't have time to really go in and allow God to truly heal our
Mhm.
hearts. And that's what I want. I want people to understand that we are not in a hurry. We
Mhm.
are not in a hurry. If a person needs to stay there, and if when the music is playing and a person is just crying, you don't have to say, this is why I'm crying. Only you and God knows. And if you
Mhm.
know that your release is needed, then get that release. And that's why we're not going to record. We're not, now we'll record for me
Mhm.
personally for my own sake, but we won't be doing Facebook or YouTube because I think some things should not be recorded live. I want
Mhm.
people to have that freedom. And just some things don't always need to be
That's true.
expressed on that side.
That's true.
So I'm trying to maintain the integrity of the ministry as well as the vulnerability of any person who comes in, because if I get up here and start boo-hooing, a person may think, oh, well, she's hurt because of XYZ. Nah, you don't know. You don't know why I'm crying.
Mhm.
Again, I may had a visitation to my past as a child,
Mhm.
and I may need to sit there for a minute
Yeah,
because it still hurts.
that's right.
I'm a woman. I'm doing things that is good, but every now and then I have to go visit that little girl,
That's
and I
right.
have to talk to that little girl and tell her that she cannot show up at 49. And if she does show up, she's gonna have to behave.
Mhm.
She's not gonna throw temper tantrums. She's
Mhm.
not going to be pulling on her hair. She's not going to be trying to make unhealthy relationships
Right.
because she's here. So
Mhm.
I don't know about you all, but every now and then I have to talk like that. I got to tell that little girl from Baker Street, sit down, girl. You're doing too much. You
Mhm.
will not influence. my future.
Hmm.
And
That's
that's the thing about Unrobe. So we all gonna have a conversation, you know. And again, it's about freedom. But in this ministry, this is what we have been afforded. All right.
all right.
Thank thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, one who sees a therapist 8 times a week.
You are okay. You okay?
I am. You know what? Listen, therapy is good.
It is.
Therapy is good. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. All right.
All right, you all. So you heard it. You heard a little bit of vulnerability from me, the transparency from me, and just the expertise from Melissa. With this particular segment, I want us just to be relaxed and just conversate and just hear from the expert. She's the expert in this field to let you know, hey, where we at and where we're going to get to. I want to encourage you to come out May the 16th. We're going to open up on that Friday night, 7 p.m., with Pastor Haley Hopper. She goes to Miracle Tabernacle International Ministries in Bessemer City, North Carolina. And then we're going to come back Saturday at 11 a.m. with a workshop. We have three speakers. Melissa is one of them. We have Minister Takara Gowans and Tanya Link. So we will have three speakers. We will have a light lunch. And then we will follow up with me, Apostle Q, on our regular morning or during our regular morning service at 10:30 a.m. Listen, y'all, let me say this again for the record. On the road, it's not a place where we just telling our business. No, it's a place where you can be free to be healed. I want you to be healed and go back out there and do the things that God has called you to be. No more cycles, no more walking around in circles, no more thinking that something is wrong with you. You know, if you're hurting, let's get some help. All right. So, Heavenly Father, I thank you right now for this day. I thank you for the opportunity to be before your people. I pray, God, that as this feed go out, God, that it will touch the hearts of people and it will just confirm some things. Those who are struggling in life, let them say, hey, I need to talk with someone. And Father, we know that you can do all things. We know that we can come to you. We can come to your son and get the healing. But we also learned today through Melissa that we have to put some things in order. We need to put some things that's very practical in our life so that we can maintain the healing that you said that we can have. We trust you, Lord, with the total healing. We trust you with total wellness. I pray for everybody, God, not just Black people. I pray for all mankind, God. I pray that they will come in contact with people who will direct them back to you, Lord. Father, we ask, God, that you continue to give us grace, continue to provide the mercy, and we are so forever grateful to give you the praise. Amen. We will see you tomorrow at 10:30. Be blessed.